In a few seconds, a bomb will explode here. Right now. Everyone on board will die. On the ground, many more will die with them. Debris will rain from the sky, tearing through the small Scottish town of Lockerbie. In the months that follow, thousands will comb the area for clues. Police officers, soldiers, volunteers. This search will become one of the largest crime scenes in history. This is no accident. It's a terrorist attack. And it will trigger one of the largest and most complex investigations of all time. The case will span continents, and nearly 40 years later, it will remain unresolved. This is the story of one of the deadliest plane crashes in history.
The Scottish countryside is about to become the largest crime scene in the world.
The magnitude of that crash never really hit home to most people in the United States.
The investigation was never formally closed.
It's certainly Britain's worst ever air disaster.
The questions about Lockerbie just refuse to go away.
Yo, this is a movie, bro.
That intro hits every time, doesn't it? I'm Jonas, by the way, one of the founders of Fern. Did you ever wonder why we're called Fern? The name partly references this beautiful, untranslatable German word called Fernweh. It describes the opposite of feeling homesick, like a longing for faraway places. This story is scary, but flying is extremely safe, and often it's the only feasible way to explore cultures across the globe. Whenever I travel, I use Saily. I can in order to create and download this.
I fucking knew it, bro. I fucking knew it, bro. Something felt off about this fucking ad, bro. I knew it. I sensed it. I sensed it in my soul, bro. I sensed it.
The Pan Am 103 Lockerbie Legacy Foundation has collected interviews with eyewitnesses and victims' relatives. Shona Black Harkness is one of them.
Why Lockerbie? Why this wee town? Why was I there?
It's just days before Christmas in Lockerbie, a small Scottish town of about 3,000 people. Just before 7 p.m., Shona rings a doorbell. She's with her younger sister and her niece, carrying Christmas presents for their friend Diane. Diane welcomes them inside. Suddenly, the house starts shaking. Shona and Diane assume it's a passing train, but it's actually the first signs of a massive explosion.
And then the next thing we felt as if the windows from the kitchen got blown through. Flames started coming through the fire. So we crawled into a corner with the two young kids. We kind of curled up to hide the kids.
The children are screaming, but they all stay put until the shaking stops. When the noise fades, Shona and Diane check on the children. Then Shona steps outside. All she sees is devastation scattered across the ground. Aircraft parts, suitcases, passports. The body of a young woman lying on her side.
She was beautiful. There was only one mark, as I said, down her face there. Her hair, spiked, wasn't out of place. Her clothing wasn't damaged.
The people of Lockerbie slowly begin to understand what happened. A plane has fallen from the sky. That night, the first images appear on TV.
Rescue teams from all over Britain are heading for the scene of what looks to be Britain's worst air crash tonight. Just after 7 this evening, a jumbo jet crashed onto the town of Lockerbie in the Scottish borders.
Witnesses describe a gigantic fireball, a blinding flash that looked almost like a nuclear explosion. Burning debris raining from the sky, wrecking houses.
Some houses on the south side of Lockerbie reportedly all but disappeared.
The scale of the destruction becomes clear the next day. Entire neighborhoods lie in ruins. At the center of it all is a massive crater. It's about 50 meters long and over 10 meters deep. This is where the wings and part of the fuselage came down. The nose was torn from the plane, but it remains largely intact. Even the writing on the side is still legible. Images of it quickly spread in the media. 11 residents of Lockerbie are dead. All 259 people aboard the plane were killed. Most were Americans traveling home for Christmas. As the town mourns, questions emerge. The plane didn't transmit a distress call, and witnesses report that it exploded in midair before impact.
When I was sitting with my aunt, a thing like an enormous mushroom fireball whizzed past the window, and all I could think of was getting her out.
All of this could mean a technical failure, but another theory quickly takes hold.
It's possible it was a bomb.
A massive salvage operation begins. For months, police officers, soldiers, and even investigators from the US search the area around Lockerbie. Thousands of volunteers help. A helicopter circles over them. The instructions are clear. If it's not a rock and it's not growing, pick it up and put it in a bag. The debris is scattered across more than 2,000 square kilometers. Search teams recover wreckage as far away as England's North Sea coast. Over the course of a year, investigators cover 2.4 million kilometers, take 35,000 photographs, and collect about 16,000 items of property. An FBI agent calls it the largest crime scene in history. A few days into the search, investigators find a crucial piece of evidence: this metal rail. It's heavily deformed, partially perforated, and covered in burn marks. It looks like it was part of a baggage container. Shortly after, they recover a fragment of a similar rail. The two pieces were part of the same metal framework. A forensic team finds traces of explosive residue. A week later, the investigators speak to the press.
The explosives residues recovered from the debris have been positively identified and are consistent with the use of a high-performance traffic explosive.
It was definitely a bomb. Someone brought down Pan Am Flight 103.
Damn.
A week after the crash, the case becomes a murder inquiry. One of the most exhaustive criminal investigations in history begins. The investigation requires cooperation between multiple countries and authorities, particularly the Scottish police and the FBI. The case is a gigantic puzzle, and investigators treat it as such. Every recovered piece of wreckage is brought to the Royal Air Force's ammunition depot, about 28 kilometers from Lockerbie. Investigators carefully arrange the fragments on the floor. Manufacturing details like serial numbers help them determine where each piece belongs. The puzzle eventually becomes so big that investigators use bicycles to move around. They know the blast originated in the aircraft's forward cargo hold. It carried 12 cargo containers and 2 pallets. Only 2 were damaged by the explosion. Further analysis shows that the blast came from inside this container, which held passenger luggage. Investigators also recover a 20-centimeter fragment of a brown suitcase.
Nah, so he put that shit in a suitcase, bruh.
A Samsonite Silhouette 4000. The bomb was most likely hidden inside it. The FBI tries to trace the suitcase to its owner, but Pan Am's luggage records are messy and inaccurate. The investigators grow frustrated. Then they find another crucial piece of evidence: a circuit board fragment smaller than a fingernail. Investigators compare it to similar parts. They discover that it was used in several models of Toshiba radios. This is extremely troubling. 2 months before the Pan Am bombing, German authorities intercepted a bomb. It was hidden inside a Toshiba radio that belonged to a Palestinian terrorist group. These findings indicate that the bomb aboard Pan Am Flight 103 was also hidden inside a radio. Investigators want answers. Months after the crash, they move all of the wreckage to Farnborough, England. This is where the Air Accidents Investigation Branch has their headquarters. Piece by piece, they reassemble a 20-meter section of the aircraft's fuselage, this time as a 3-dimensional model. The combined clues help investigators understand how such a small bomb could bring down an entire aircraft. It's late afternoon. An aircraft is parked on a stand southeast of Terminal 3. It's a Boeing 747 operated by Pan Am. The airline was the first to order the iconic jumbo jet in the late 60s. For decades, it was the United States' leading international airline, known for the infamous Pan Am smile. But at this point, the company is in serious financial trouble. The plane preparing for departure has been in service for 18 years. Its name is visible on the fuselage: Clipper Made of the Seas. At the same time, 109 passengers arrived from Frankfurt, Germany. Pan Am Flight 103 is scheduled to take some of them onward to New York City and Detroit. Another 194 passengers will board at Heathrow. The luggage from Frankfurt is transferred to the aircraft. Everything follows standard procedure. The crew assumes the bags were properly screened in Frankfurt, so there are no additional checks.
Nah, what if it was one of the workers, bro? What if they got paid to sneak that shit in, bro?
Among the bags is this unremarkable brown Samsonite suitcase. It's placed in a container and loaded into the forward cargo hold. At 6:04 p.m., all 243 passengers are seated, and the plane taxis onto the...
Nah, bro, imagine you're in a fucking plane, bro. You're having the finest wine, bro. You're having caviar on a fucking chip. I don't know what the fuck they eat it on. Some extravagant ass shit. And you get Swiss cheesed by a fucking bomb. I'd be punching the air in the afterlife, bro. I ain't even gonna hold you, bro.
21 minutes later, Pan Am Flight 103 takes off on its transatlantic journey. Captain James McQuarrie gently guides the jumbo jet through the heavy clouds. As a seasoned pilot, he knows how to handle the strong winds that are blowing that evening. At 6:56 p.m., the aircraft reaches an altitude of roughly 9,400 meters. It's approaching the Scottish border. Apart from the 3 men in the cockpit, there are 13 cabin crew members on board. They're already serving drinks and handing out headphones.
There's no way it's that spacious.
At 6:58 p.m., First Officer Ray Wagner radios in with their current position. At 7:02 p.m., the Clipper Maid of the Seas is cleared to cross the Atlantic. But it never will. The brown Samsonite suitcase is located right here. Inside it is a radio. Hidden in its casing are about 450 grams of explosives and a timer. Exactly 50 seconds after 7:02 p.m., that timer hits 0. To understand what exactly happens in the next few seconds, we asked our friends at Mentor Pilot for help.
The bomb blows a small hole in the cargo container as well as the plane's outer skin right here. And at the same time, it also tears through the main cabin floor above it. The explosion acts like a bubble of high-pressure gas, and it blisters the plane's skin right here. Some of the energy from the blast escapes through the hole into the air, but part of it also bounces around inside of the cargo container. The shockwave forces its way through the narrow space between the container and the fuselage, and reflections and chemical reactions then create a second shockwave, which pushes the metal outwards, stretching and blistering the skin around the hole. The pressure then keeps moving through the gaps inside of the plane's structure, soon reaching both the top and the bottom of the fuselage. As it does so, it causes multiple further cracks, and under this stress, the hole grows larger and the metal starts folding back into a star-shaped pattern. The pressure also bounces around inside of cavities under the roof and along the bottom of the fuselage, and together this builds up an overpressure that makes the front section of the plane start breaking apart more and more, until the upper and lower part of the hull is ripped apart. More and more cabin floor beams are now disrupted, whilst cargo and bodies start falling out of the plane. At this point, only the tiny window area is connecting the nose part to the rest of the fuselage, meaning that the plane's structure is now extremely weak. And about 2 to 3 seconds after the explosion, this section here then breaks off, causing the entire front of the aircraft to start turning away to the right. The nose section now detaches and flings backwards, where it hits one of the engines, breaking that off the wing. And without the front part to direct the airstream and balance it out, the rest of the plane now tilts upwards and rolls violently to the left. As the detached nose hurtles towards the ground, the rest of the plane keeps breaking up. The remaining engines comes off, and when the tail fin then detaches, the back section of the fuselage likely slides sideways and also separates. The wings then also breaks apart at some point, although it's not clear exactly how, but they soon tumble down towards Lockerbie. And when they hit the ground, they explode into a massive fireball and creates a big crater. Around this, more than a dozen houses loses their roof from the shockwave, and an 18-meter section of the fuselage now also crashes into a nearby street, scattering luggage and bodies across the road and into nearby gardens. In total, over 300 tons of debris, suitcases, cargo and passengers falls down over the area, with the wind carrying some of the lighter debris as far away as the North Sea. The nose section with the 3 bodies of the flight crew as well as some first-class passengers is then crushed completely flat as it impacts the ground on its left side about 4 kilometers to the east of Lockerbie.
270 people died that day.
Scary as
but maybe they didn't have to.
What the
Just
fuck?
weeks before the attack, the U.S. Embassy in Finland receives a phone call. It's a threat. The caller warns that within 2 weeks there will be a bombing on a Pan Am flight from Frankfurt to the U.S. The victims' families are outraged. Why wasn't the threat made public at the time? Then Vice President George H.W. Bush explains the decision on TV.
Sometimes by going public, you give undue attention to what the terrorist wants to call attention to.
Damn.
In the first 24 hours after the bombing, 4 different groups claim responsibility for the attack. One is from Iran, another from Ireland. The list also includes the Palestinian terror cell whose bomb was intercepted in Germany. The CIA believes the Iranian group's claim is the most credible. Their motive is believed to be revenge against the United States. About 6 months before Lockerbie, U.S. Navy forces shot down an Iranian passenger plane in the Persian Gulf. The U.S. military later claimed it had mistaken the aircraft for a fighter jet. 290 innocent people were killed. Despite numerous theories, progress on the Lockerbie case is slow. Leads point to several countries, but none pan out. The first real lead comes in 1989. Investigators re-examined shredded pieces of clothing from the crash site. Among them is a scrap of fabric from a pair of pants. They're from a brand called Yorkie. The pants were in the same suitcase as the bomb. The fabric leads the investigators to a small clothing shop on the Mediterranean island of Malta. An officer speaks with the shop's owner, Tony Gauci. Gauci remembers a very strange customer. A man walks into the shop. He buys everything Gauci shows him without hesitation and regardless of size. A baby onesie, a black umbrella, a wool jacket, and a pair of Yorkie trousers. Gauci is able to describe the man in detail, and the FBI sends a sketch artist to Malta to create a composite drawing. Investigators interview Gauci several times and show him pictures of suspected terrorists. None of them resemble the man he saw in his shop. So the FBI sends additional agents to Malta. Their job is to find out who entered and left the country around the time of the attack. For that, they have to comb through piles of immigration records by hand. More than a year after the bombing, investigators uncover another crucial piece of evidence in the debris. Once again, it's a circuit board fragment smaller than a fingernail. The explosion must have blasted it into the collar of a shirt that was also in the Samsonite suitcase. But it wasn't part of the Toshiba radio that held the bomb. Scottish investigators try to track where it came from, and with the CIA's help, they eventually find a lead. Months before the attack, 2 Libyan men were arrested in Senegal. They were carrying an electronic timer. It's the exact same model as the newly discovered circuit board. They also had 8 kilograms of explosives with them, the same type found in Lockerbie. Since the 1970s,
Yo, they get every single detail, bro. Not a single cranny will go unlooked, bro.
Libya has been repeatedly linked to terror attacks around the world. The country's been on the list of suspects from the very beginning. And there's also a possible motive. On April 5, 1986, just before 2 a.m., a bomb explodes in West Berlin. The target is a nightclub known to be popular with U.S. soldiers. 3 people are killed and over 200 injured. Suspicion quickly falls on Libya and its leader Muammar Gaddafi. The attack appears to have been aimed directly at American citizens. It's most likely retaliation for the sinking of 2 Libyan ships by the U.S. just weeks earlier. The American response comes only days after the Berlin nightclub bombing.
My fellow Americans, at 7 o'clock this evening, Eastern Time, air and naval forces of the United States launched a series of strikes against the headquarters, terrorist facilities, and military assets that support Muammar Gaddafi's subversive activities.
President Ronald Reagan orders U.S. forces to bomb the Libyan cities of Tripoli and Benghazi. Though officially aimed at military targets, the bombing also kills civilians. According to Libyan state media, Gaddafi's adopted daughter is also among the victims. Was the Lockerbie bombing another act of revenge ordered by Libyan ruler Muammar Gaddafi? The trail of the 2 Libyans arrested in Senegal soon goes cold. But the electronic timer they carried leads investigators to Switzerland, to a company called Mebo. Investigators confirmed that Mebo manufactured the timer linked to the circuit board fragment found at Lockerbie. They also learned the company sold multiple units of the same timer to the Libyan military. More and more, evidence points to Libya's involvement in the attack on Pan Am Flight 103.
Yo, I ain't gonna lie, bro. This is too much. This is too much information, bro. My cranium is hurting, bro. My cranium is hurting.
FBI investigators question Mebo's owners. They show them the composite drawing of the suspect from Malta. One of them claims to recognize the man. He says they did business together and that he remembers his name. Abdelbasset Ali al-Magrahi, a former member of the Libyan intelligence service. Investigators obtain a picture of Magrahi and show it to Tony Gauci in Malta. Gauci says that, of all the images he's seen, this one most resembles the mysterious customer. After years of painstaking work, investigators finally have a real suspect. And the net begins to tighten. Records place Magrahi in Malta on December 7, 1988, the day of the suspicious purchase at Gauci's shop. Baggage logs in Frankfurt also show an unaccompanied bag arriving from Malta, bound for Pan Am Flight 103 to New York. Investigators also learned that Magrahi was more than just an intelligence officer. He served as head of security for a Libyan airline. This would have allowed him to move freely around Malta airport without raising suspicion. He even used a fake passport to enter the island on the very morning of the attack. Was he the one who sent the suitcase with the bomb inside it from Malta to Pan Am Flight 103? Investigators follow another lead to an airport manager in Malta. Like Magrahi, he appears to have links to Libyan intelligence. His name is Lamin Khalifa Fima. Immigration records place Magrahi and Fima together on the day of the attack. Fima had access to official Air Malta baggage tags, making it relatively easy to slip a bag onto a flight bound for Frankfurt. Then comes a final, crucial piece of the puzzle. A witness. He says Fima stored explosives at Malta airport, and that he saw both suspects together the day before the bombing, with a large brown suitcase. Nearly 3 years after Lockerbie, investigators finally have two clear suspects.
Why did the sound effect play, man?
Soon, the world will know their names. On November 14, 1991, one of the largest police investigations in history leads to formal charges.
We charge that 2 Libyan officials, acting as operatives of the Libyan intelligence service, along with other co-conspirators, planted and detonated the bomb that destroyed Pan Am Flight 103.
Libyan intelligence officers Abdelbasset Ali al-Magrahi and Lamin Khalifa Fima are to stand trial. Both American and British prosecutors are convinced that Libya and its leader Muammar al-Gaddafi were also involved in the attack. The prosecutor also accuses Magrahi and Fima of being fugitives from justice. The US and the UK both want them extradited to stand trial, but Gaddafi refuses. He denies any responsibility and offers to try both suspects in Libya instead. Years pass. Negotiations stall. Sanctions are imposed, but nothing happens. 10 years after the bombing, Gaddafi finally agrees to a compromise. The two suspects will stand trial on neutral ground in the Netherlands, but under Scottish law. The trial takes place at Camp Zeist, a former US military base near Utrecht. It's temporarily declared Scottish territory.
11 years on, and the tears are still flowing as the relatives of the victims of Lockerbie arrive, finally, for tomorrow's trial.
It's a trial unlike any other. Dozens of relatives travel to the Netherlands to face the men accused of killing 270 people. But some have doubts. Why are just 2 low-level operatives on trial when Libya's political leaders must have signed off on the attack? Prosecutors say the 2 men hid the bomb inside a suitcase and flew to Malta the day before the attack. From there, they allegedly sent the suitcase as unaccompanied luggage to the United States via Frankfurt and London. Magrahi and Fima plead not guilty. The defense argues the bomb was planted by a Palestinian terrorist group. The trial drags on for months and more than 230 witnesses are called. Among them are airport staff, Lockerbie residents, another Libyan intelligence officer, and Tony Gauci, the Maltese shopkeeper. On January 31st, 2001, the Scottish judges delivered their final verdict. Magrahi, guilty. Fima, not guilty. Magrahi's conviction could have closed the case. Instead, it raises even more questions, especially for one man.
The truth is the truth, and sooner or later it'll come out. And I would like the death of my daughter to be associated with the idea of integrity in searching for the truth.
Dr. Jim Swire is a British physician. His
His
daughter was
daughter
killed in the
was a-
Lockerbie bombing. He
Damn.
publicly doubts McGrahy's guilt. The court's reasoning doesn't convince him. A trial observer appointed by the UN claims the case made no sense. A Scottish law professor calls it satisfactory process, but a flawed result. Swire challenges several key pieces of evidence, most notably the credibility of shopkeeper Tony Gauci and the origin of the timer. It turns out that Gauci was far less certain in identifying McGrahy than the court was led to believe. Police may even have offered a financial reward for his testimony. One of Mebo's owners later retracts his statements. He now claims the circuit board fragment found in Lockerbie did not come from a timer his company sold to Libya. The verdict makes little sense to the UN trial observer. Prosecutors had based their entire case on the assumption that Fahima and McGrahy worked together to plant the bomb. So why did only one of them end up being convicted? In March 2002, an appeals court upholds McGrahy's conviction. He's sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years. A year later, Libya formally accepts responsibility for the Lockerbie attack. The government agrees to pay $2.7 billion in compensation to the victims' families.
Damn.
Gaddafi's son later claims this was only done to lift international sanctions. But to the public, it's a confession. Jim Swire keeps pressing for a review of McGrahy's case. Scotland eventually agrees, but while the process is underway, McGrahy is diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer. With little time left to live, in 2009, he's released on compassionate grounds.
I would say deserved, but I don't know if he actually did
allowed
it
to
or
return
not.
to Libya. Back home, he's welcomed as a hero. For many families of the Lockerbie victims, the images are unbearable. 3 years later, McGrahy dies. In 2017, McGrahy's family files a posthumous appeal against the verdict. 4 years later, a Scottish court rejects it and upholds the conviction. Gaddafi himself died back in 2011 after rebels overthrew his regime. But the Lockerbie case refuses to go away.
Today marks 32 years since the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103. And on this day, new charges have been filed against one of the alleged terrorists.
In 2020, another Libyan intelligence officer is charged. His name is Abu Aguila Massoud. He's accused of building the bomb, setting the timer, and sending the Samsonite suitcase on its way to Pan Am Flight 103. The U.S. Department of Justice claims he confessed to this when questioned at a Libyan detention facility in 2012. In early 2026, Massoud is brought before a U.S. court. He denies the allegations
At least
and
he's
claims he
honest.
was forced into making a false confession by 3 masked men who threatened him and his
Oh, never
family.
mind.
The Libyan official who supposedly recorded Massoud's confession back in 2012 said the recording was lost. In early March 2025, new documents surface, once again implicating the former Libyan regime. To this day, 2 American victims associations strongly oppose Jim Swire and his belief in McGrahy's innocence. They're also critical of a recent series starring Academy Award winner Colin Firth as Jim Swire. For the families of the victims, nearly 40 years have passed, shaped by grief, anger, and the search for answers. That search continues. And in the Lockerbie case, it may never truly end.
Yo, this shit's a movie, bruh.